Welcome, everyone. As you log in, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining us from in the chat. It takes a few minutes here, but we'll get started in just a minute or two. Okay, well, I'll start from Georgia. Welcome. Welcome, Monica. Glad you could join us tonight. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to you all from the International Dyslexia Association, Northern New England Alliance, serving Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. I'm Susan Horahan, the president of IDA-NNEA. Welcome to our Read for Parents webinar featuring Allison Wiest tonight from the Maine Parent Federation, as she discusses that supports the Maine Parent Federation offers and an overview of the special education process as it relates to Maine. As a branch, we are thrilled to provide these Read for Parents webinars every other month, which focus on different IDA fact sheets and areas of interest to families and educators. The IDA fact sheets are a great tool in informing families and professionals alike on the journey of dyslexia. As many of you parents and practitioners can probably relate, getting structured literacy instruction for students in need is more often than not a difficult journey for parents, students, and teachers. As a branch, we are honored to bring these informative sessions to you as we work to bring structured literacy to all students in all classrooms, and especially to those who struggle. To support today's session, we have Andrea Pollock managing the technical aspects of the webinar, and we have Chris Riley from New Hampshire, who will be monitoring and adding valuable links and resources into the chat. During the session, please use the chat to respond to prompts from the presenters, and save your questions for the end of our webinar, where we'll have approximately 20 minutes of questions and answers, which will be facilitated by Chris Riley. Just a note that certificates are not offered for these Read for Parent webinars, and the webinar and the handouts will be posted on our website within a week. So give us a little bit of time and we'll have those available to you on our website. Okay, we'd like you to please consider joining our branch and inviting your friends and colleagues. There are many advantages, including connecting with our community, staying informed, great deals like IDA TV, and opportunities for expanding your network. And there's a variety of membership levels, so you can look them over, and one will surely fit your needs. So take a look at what different levels we offer. Our branch also has a number of activities that we include each year. We have our Read for Parents, which you're at now, and our next Read for Parents will be in August with our very own board members, Chris Riley and Andrea Pollock. Tune in until the end of tonight's session for more details. We also collaborate with Wilson to offer some of their courses, and we have scholarships available for those courses. Most of them are one day, one of them is a couple days. We have our annual conference, which this year will be in March of 2025. There is an Amplify event coming up June 20th next week, and we'll give more information about that after the presentation. We also have newsletters that go out in February and December, and sometimes in between those dates when there's a lot going on. And we're also partnering with the Reading League, the New Hampshire chapter, which has just become the Reading League. They've just initiated. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Allison Wiest from the Maine Parent Federation. Allison is passionate about her work as a parent trainer with Maine Parent Federation. This work with the agency began in 2017, acting as a family support navigator, providing one-to-one support to families, and currently as a parent trainer, providing trainings and information to educate and empower families. Some of the training topics include education is special, transition to kindergarten, transition planning, and supportive decision-making. Allison also works with her colleague Dylan to provide education to Maine's youth on self-advocacy and person-centered future planning. Allison collaborates and participates on various committees as the voice for families and youth with different abilities, including the Maine State Rehabilitation Council. In addition, she continues to work closely with the University of Maine's Center for Community Inclusion and Disability Studies and Maine Access to Inclusive Education Resources to better serve families and their youth. Personally, she is the mom of a 12-year-old boy with autism and advocates daily to ensure his needs are met. She has received training in the DIR floor time therapy, which she incorporates daily with her son. Allison loves being a part of this work and enjoys educating and supporting families and youth. So we're so delighted to have Allison here with us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to pull up my screen here for everybody to see. So again, thank you for that introduction. I am Allison Wiest, and I'm happy to be here talking with you all today and sharing our Education is Special training with you. It's really an overall guide for families, providing language and explaining the differences between IEPs and 504s, and then really giving family tips and strategies on how to advocate for our children in special education. So again, thank you for having me tonight. And there we go. So initially, I just want to let everybody know that Maine Parent Federation, we are a parent information center. We are not a legal service agency. There is a parent information center in every state. And so we are the parent training and information center for the state of Maine. So all of this information that I am sharing with you tonight is general information for you. So our agenda tonight is really going to be talking about who Maine Parent Federation is, what our work is, and what the services are that we provide. Again, we're going to be talking about special education law and giving you language, and then also talking about advocacy and providing resources at the end. And there will also be a Q&A session at the end to answer any questions. So who is Maine Parent Federation? We, as I mentioned, we are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Maine. Basically, we are a grassroots agency. In 1983, parents of children with disabilities and special healthcare needs started meeting around a kitchen table to really discuss their concerns, their thoughts, their ideas, really on how to improve their child's education. And how to provide more opportunities for them. So we really started, again, as I said, grassroots, and then in 1984, we started as an agency. So our mission is really to bring the power of knowledge and voice to families of children and dependents with special healthcare needs. We often use the term now different abilities as well. To really open that gateway to the systems of care. We provide one-to-one support to families, but always with the goal of being to educate and empower families so that they can, again, advocate and navigate the different systems of care. We provide, as I mentioned, information that can be through, the trainings that I provide, to families, to agencies, to schools. We also have employees, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple of slides, but we have employees that literally man the phones. And so when a family has a question, they can just call our agency, or they can email our agency and ask for information and resources. We support families, and we help them with referrals and things like that. So again, everything, we really are that first place. So initially how I got connected with the agency was because my son was newly diagnosed with autism. And as a new parent with a new diagnosis, I didn't know where to start. So a lot of times we do receive, um, you know, a phone call or an email from a family who has just gotten a diagnosis. But then we also work with families all the way up through, and then we work with adults to, to provide support and help them navigate the different systems in Maine. So again, just more information kind of about what we provide. I already mentioned that. So we do receive funding. So we've received federal funding, and I'm going to talk about that too, but we also receive state funding. We receive grants. And so all of this funding, the grants, the federal funding that we receive really help us to provide different services in different sort of buckets. So some of the things that we provide, so under the Real Transition Partners, that's really the work that we do with youth. And we work on, we go into schools and we work on transition planning with students. We help them advocate for themselves, self-advocacy, plan for their future, person-centered planning, a lot of that type of work. Some of our other grants, the MCHB grant is a grant that provides for the Family Support Navigator program, which is probably our most utilized program. And again, is how a lot of families initially get connected to us. It's basically families that have navigated different systems of care in Maine, and we put them through a training program, and then they are available to other families who need support at no cost. And they're basically a support person. They're not a case manager. I think there's some confusion sometimes about, oh, are they a case manager? Are they, an educational advocate or anything like that? They are not, but they are a supportive parent that, again, can help a family in a lot of different ways, whether that's just providing, some advice and helping them with resources, to going to meetings with them, to helping them manage paperwork. There's a whole host of things that they can do. So that's probably one of our most utilized. We have, like, I think 40 family support navigators that cover our entire state. So it's a very well utilized program. And then some of the other grants that provide for trainings and resources that I'm providing you today. So every staff member, I think this is really important. Every staff member at Maine Parent Federation is either a parent or a family member of a person with a disability or a special healthcare needs. So we all have that lived experience that makes us incredibly passionate about the work, about helping others and making a difference. So every single one of us is either a parent or a family member. And we have amongst all of us, we are a small group, and I think there's some pictures of us coming up. We are a small group, but we have a wealth of experience and knowledge navigating the different systems. And again, because we are a parent training and information center, and there's one in all of the other states, we will collaborate with our partners, whether that's partner agencies within our state, or whether it's other PTIs in other states that we can collaborate. If we don't have the answer to something, which sometimes we don't have the answer, we're not experts on everything. And so sometimes we don't have the answer, but if we don't have the answer, then we will get the answer for you. And here we are. This is our current staff. So our full-time staff is relatively small. There's only 8 of us. Carrie Woodcock is our executive director. And then Anne and Robin, they are they're basically the 2 that manage our Family Support Navigator program that I mentioned. Then there's myself as a trainer. I work alongside Dylan, who typically presents with me and is sort of my technical guy, but he's at he's at another conference, but he and I work very closely together on trainings and working with youth. And then we have some 3 other people that work in the office, either answering the phone or providing resources to families. So we are a small staff, but we are mighty. So some of our services, again, trainings and webinars. So I know Susan mentioned a couple of the or a handful of trainings that we do, but we're constantly adding to that. If there is a need that comes up and we hear about it, that parents are looking for information on certain topics, then we will research and we will create a training on that for families. We do host monthly webinars, Dylan and I, on different topics. Again, we're going into schools a lot more now on different trainings. So we're really trying to connect with as many families, as many youth, as many agencies as possible to get the information that they're looking for. We have that parent to support. That's the Family Support Navigator program that I already mentioned. Individualized assistance that we provide to families. We do a quarterly newsletter. And then our action alerts. We stay on top of what's happening in legislature, and our executive director, Carrie Woodcock, sits on a lot of different committees. And one of our things that we do is when there are changes coming or there's things in legislature that are going to impact our families, we stay on top of that, and we're leaders. We spearhead a lot of different leadership groups and advocacy groups, so that family voices are brought forth. So that's another very important role that we provide. All of our services, this is really important, all of our services are free to parents. And there doesn't need to be a qualifying criteria to receive support. We are the Parent Training and Information Center for, families with children with disabilities and special healthcare needs, but it can just be a family contacting us and their child doesn't have a diagnosis. Maybe there's a questioning of a diagnosis, or, they just have some general questions. So again, somebody doesn't have to have Maine Care to receive services from us. There doesn't have to be a diagnosis even. And all of our services are free. Our parent information specialists, they are the people that you talk to when you first call the office. So they are an encyclopedia of information, probably more so than I am. They have a lot of information at their fingertips. And so they are, available for families to just pick up the phone or to email to ask questions. Here are some of the trainings that we provide. Something that's really important to mention, and you'll see that in the slides today, but our trainings are very family focused. So we make an effort to really be sure that we're using language that is easy for families to understand. And so that we really strive to do that, and it's really important to us. So these are some of our family focused training topics that we have. We talk about dental health and really how important that is and how tricky it can be for families with kids with different abilities. Our education and special training is what I'm going to be presenting tonight. Healthy eating, that can really be a challenge for any kiddo, but again, specifically for kids who might have some sensory challenges or some physical challenges, that can definitely be a challenge. So that's one of our trainings. The Katie Beckett waiver program, we have a training on that. Supported decision-making, Social Security, shared living services. I just presented that earlier today. SMART goals, transition planning, transition to kindergarten. Who we are is basically what you're getting tonight. And then we also do a lot of training around self-advocacy and supported decision-making, actually with youth. So, and again, we're constantly adding, we're working on a training right now for a training for parents, as well as a training for youth on sexual health and education for people with different abilities. So we're always adding, so stay tuned. Again, this is just sort of the the buckets kind of, I guess. When you go to our website, you can find information in these different areas. So again, if you know, a family has a new diagnosis or they want some information on a particular diagnosis, they can go to our website and go under diagnosis and you can find information on that. So we have a variety of sort of buckets on where families can get information. So that is who we are as an agency. And now I'm going to sort of dive into special education. There's a lot of sort of, it's law, but it's in family-friendly language. And again, talk about IEPs and 504s, and then some about advocacy at the end. And I am going to take a drink real quick because I'm the only one talking. Like I said, I usually like to have my counterpart Dylan so we can sort of bounce things off of each other. So, so I'm going to talk in general about public education, IDEA, and then I'll be talking, you know, more specifically about Maine's Department of Education. So all public education is provided by federal and state departments of education. So the Department of Education, the United States federal government, and then in our state, the Maine Department of Education. So who oversees special education? So again, under the federal law, federal government, special education is mandated by the Individuals, with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, which is overseen by the Federal Office of Special Education Programs, or OSAP. We use all these acronyms, so we try to be really careful in our trainings as well to make sure that we spell it all out for families. And then in this, under the state, in our state, it's mandated by Maine's Unified Special Education Regulations. We call it MUSER, or Chapter 101. And that is overseen by the Maine Department of Education Office of Special Services. So IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a law, a federal law that provides federal financial assistance to state and local education agencies to ensure a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, another acronym that we use a lot, via special education programs and related services to eligible children with disabilities. So basically breaking that down, that again, education is provided, it's free to families and students. It's appropriate, so it's meeting their individual needs. And again, in that public sector, in that public education. And FAPE, or free and appropriate public education, is really a key component of special education. We'll talk about that. So there are 4 parts of IDEA. I won't spend a ton of time on each of these, but there are 4 parts. So Part A really lays out the foundation for the rest of the Act. It defines the terms that are used in this Act, and it provides for the creation of the Office of Special Education Programs. So it's really foundational, right? And then Part B and B619, sort of like 1 and 2 parts, really lays out the educational guidelines for school-age children, ages 3 to 22. 619, B619 is really the guidelines for our preschool kiddos 3 to 5 years old. It also declares states are required to educate students with disabilities, and it provides financial support for state and local school districts. Part C is the early intervention kiddos. So it recognizes the need for early intervention for young children. It provides guidelines concerning the funding and services for children birth to through age 2. It also identifies who's responsible for child find, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. It indicates indicating eligible services for families through Part C, and then it also identifies who's responsible for providing those services. So again, we're thinking about early intervention, birth to 2 years old. And then Part D, that's where Maine Parent Federation falls into. We receive part of our funding through IDEA, through Part D. But it basically it's sort of those other programs. There's those supportive community programs as well, but it provides national activities to improve the education of children with disabilities. It includes grants to improve education and transitional services, and then it provides resources to support programs, projects, and activities that really will have a positive result for children with disabilities. So again, we receive some of our funding through Part D. And if you didn't know this, and it's interesting because a lot of families don't know this, we are actually listed under on the IEP. So we're listed as the Parent Training and Information Center on an IEP, and that is because we do receive that federal funding. So to talk more specifically about Maine, as I mentioned, Maine's Unified Special Education Regulations, that's the Maine law. That's Maine's interpretation of IDEA, the federal law that enforces the rights of children with disabilities. And in our state, MUSER, Maine's Unified Special Education Regulations, must meet or exceed the federal law. So we will never have less than what the federal law is. We'll either be meeting it or exceeding it. Currently, the language that where Maine is exceeding is in italics. So if you pick up MUSER, chapter 101, and you are ready for bed and you want to do some light reading, if you read the big document, the language in italics is where it's Maine's language. So it's where Maine is exceeding the federal law. And we do have, if a family is looking for a copy of MUSER, we can provide a family with a copy of MUSER. So, so what is special education? So special education is specially designed instruction, another acronym, SDI, provided at no cost to the parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. So specially designed instruction is the altering of the curriculum so that the child can access the education. And it's specifically tied to the goals. So again, that really stands out and is an important piece of special education. Children who are receiving special education and have an IEP are getting specially designed instruction, that altering of the curriculum so that they're able to access the education. So when we think about FAPE, or that free and appropriate public education through IDEA, that federal law, that includes access to specially designed instruction that I just mentioned, so that altering of the curriculum so that the child can access their education. And it's conducted within all school classrooms or environment. So it can be, you know, again, in the general education classroom, it could be in a special education classroom, it could be in the gymnasium, it could be in the art room, anywhere where they need that direct instruction. And then when it's determined appropriate by the IEP team, it also allows access to specially designed instruction at home. We saw this during the pandemic, or in other places, if a child is hospitalized or something like that. So the law does include that specially designed instruction in other areas as well, if that is deemed appropriate by the IEP team. And then it also includes services and accommodations, and we're going to dive into those in a minute here too. So what are some examples of services that would be included under special education? So a lot of times we see speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, consultation from specialists. So again, that might be a BCBA, it might be a reading intervention specialist, counseling services if a child is seeing a social worker, a licensed social worker, and then extended school year services is also another example of services that would be included under special education. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but these are just some examples of accommodations. So sort of showing you services versus accommodations. So accommodations that might be included under special education would be things like extra time for schoolwork, including tests, planned motor breaks for certain students throughout the day, preferred or flexible seating, taking tests verbally rather than written. And then that paraprofessional support. So if a child needs support, whether that's 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, or as needed, that would be included as well. I'm sure, again, a lot of you here, are familiar with different types of accommodations. Assistive tech and graphic organizers and reduce workloads and things like that. So these are just some examples. Again, not a comprehensive list, but some things that would be included under accommodations. Special education can also include instruction for positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, another acronym, behavior plan. So for students who may have had a functional behavior assessment and they have a behavior plan, that is also something that would be included under special education. Social and emotional skills or goals for students. My son, that is a huge challenge for him. He struggles socially. So again, in his IEP and his special education plan, he has goals where he's working on that. Independent, as kids get older, we see more goals and a work around independent living skills, transition planning for adulthood, and then voc rehab, really starting to think about what life is going to look like after high school. Where is a child going to live, or where do they want to live? Transition planning, are they going to college afterwards, voc rehab, what type of career is interesting to them. So again, all of these things are included in our special education. So let's take another drink. So the Individualized Education Program, or the IEP, is a document that ensures that all children with disabilities have access to that free and appropriate public education. So it's a standardized form that is used. And again, it's, it has the goals and it has the progress and all of that on there. We do another whole training around SMART goals, but that is a document that ensures that students are getting that free and appropriate public education. It indicates the services and the accommodations, and we talked about some of the services and accommodations, which will be provided based on that student's unique and individual needs. So again, for, two students can have the same diagnosis, qualifying diagnosis, and their IEPs can look completely different. Also, the eligibility is determined by Maine's Unified Special Education Regulations, and then the plan is developed by the IEP team. Again, we're going to talk about who's on the IEP team in a moment, but it's a team consensus, and then always looking at least restrictive environment first. That the least restrictive environment for the student is looked at first. Can the child access the education in a general education setting with the support? So we're always looking at that first. That's sort of general education with support setting first before we're looking at some of those more self-contained or other specialized programs. So how does it begin? And this could be tricky for probably some of the families that might be here tonight. So typically a referral can come from anyone, right? So a referral can come at any time from anyone. It can come from a parent. So I was the one for my son. I was the one who made the referral. It can come from, in our state, currently, CDS, Child Development Services, is we're sort of in an influx right now, but is handling early intervention. then school-age children, it might be the school that's making a referral or another provider that's making a referral. So anybody at any time can make a referral for a student to see if they're eligible for special education. However, under the law, under Part C, the school district is mandated to engage in child find. So it's basically a method by which the state identifies which students need access to special education services. So the schools are mandated to find those students. Like I said, a referral can come from anywhere. I'm guessing for, some of the families here, my son, he had autism, so we knew early on that he needed services. But, for some kiddos who have a specific learning disability, they might not be identified until later on. So again, they're in the school system, and that may be coming from the parent, or it may be something a teacher or something is seeing at school. After a referral has been made, a meeting must be scheduled to talk about the student's strengths, to talk about what the concerns are, and then to determine what evaluations are needed in order to determine eligibility. Also looking at where is the student at currently, their present level of performance, we call it. Not only looking at academics, but also looking at social and emotional levels as well. I think that, it can get tricky here in that, and we hear it a lot from families, where a lot of school systems have RTI, response to intervention, or MTSS, which is multi-tiered support. And so a lot of times I think what is happening is that a student might be struggling in reading or writing or something like that. And so, the schools are doing their first attempt at intervention. So they are providing support within the classroom. And again, there's multi levels of support. So they might be starting with one level of support, and then they're increasing it, and then maybe they need to increase it again. And I think what we're hearing that is tricky for families is that clearly, clearly for the parents and for the student, they need a higher level, special education services. But the clock is ticking, and even though they are receiving some of these, push-in supports, RTI or MTSS support, that is sort of like prolonging sometimes what the student needs. So I think it's really important. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit more, that, again, families are continuing to advocate, to ask questions, to ask for the data, and again, to sort of stay on top of school districts sometimes, again, maybe we try that initially, but we don't leave them in that sort of, in that support type scenario if we're not seeing any progress, that we really are moving through the appropriate channels to get them the support that they need. We can talk a little bit more about that later too. So let's see. So, and again, I think I kind of touched on this a little bit before as well. So for some kiddos with dyslexia or a special specific learning disability, that might not show up initially, right? So, and again, even when we're talking about little kiddos, birth to 2 years old, they might be delayed in certain areas, and we don't really know what that is yet, right? So, a diagnosis can really be challenging at a young age, basically. So developmental delay is used to qualify under Part C. They look at the following areas of developmental delay, and that is cognitive, physical, including vision and hearing, communication, social and emotional, and then adaptive development. And at this level, an individual family service plan is what's written for a child with goals. And so, again, I think, the takeaway here being that it really is hard to diagnose a child at this age. So using that developmental delay allows for a child to receive some services early on. So Part B, 619, those ages 3 to 5. So in those kiddos, they can either be identified with a disability, or again, we can still use that developmental delay to qualify a child for services. However, at this point, a child may be going to preschool. And so instead of an IFSP, we're going to start looking at an educational plan now. So an individualized education plan will be written. And we're starting to also look at that least restrictive environment. What is that least restrictive environment for the child at this point in time? So once a child reaches, 5 years old, school age children, the criteria for eligibility changes. And it's based on one or more of the 13 identified disabilities. And it's on the next slide, and we'll talk about that in a minute. At the age of 5, it's the last year. So developmental delay can be used to qualify at the age of 5, but that is the last year that they allow a child to use that developmental delay for qualifying. But also the other thing that's really important, and I think it gets really tricky for families, is that this diagnosis must negatively impact their ability to access their education in the general curriculum. So again, just because a child has a diagnosis, disability diagnosis, doesn't always mean that they are automatically going to get services if the school says their diagnosis isn't negatively impacting their ability to access the education. And so this can be really challenging for families. And we'll talk some more about this, but that's why, again, so important to ask for data from the school, to keep data, to get other evaluators or other people working with your child as well, to sort of help to make a case for your child. And we can talk about that a little bit more too. So I don't know why. Oh, there is. So 13 qualifying diagnoses for children ages 5 to 22 now. So in the state of Maine, a child can stay in school till the age of 22. At that point, they've either graduated or they age out. So the 13 qualifying diagnoses are autism spectrum disorder, deaf blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. So again, you're probably familiar with these, but again, these are the 13 qualifying diagnoses. And again, some of the diagnoses that a child might have fall under these sort of overarching. So like dyslexia falls under specific learning disability, ADHD falls under other health impairments. So again, some of these diagnoses fall under these bigger umbrellas. So the initial IEP meeting, so language is always interesting, I always chuckle, will be held within a reasonable time period after referral is made. Who comes up with this? But anyways, again, I think it's really important. My experience with school systems has been good. My son's school has been great to work with. I am obviously a strong advocate for him. But typically we're seeing, a meeting being held within a week to 2. However, we do hear from families that are struggling to get an initial meeting after referral has been made. And again, I think sometimes what's happening, and I mentioned it a little bit before, is that the school recognizes that there's some challenges, that this a student might be behind in reading. And so they're going to provide some support through that RTI model or MTSS model. And so they're just doing that. And so that's why a meeting hasn't happened. So again, as parents, just contacting the school and staying on top of it if you haven't heard something from the school within a week or two after a referral has been made. In that initial meeting, that is to talk about the strengths of the child as well as the concerns. Again, to determine what evaluations do we need to complete on the student to determine eligibility. And then again, looking at the student's current level of performance, academically, socially, and emotionally. I think the other thing I wanted to mention too is that, when we're talking about evaluations, I think that that's also another really tricky area to navigate for families, and that, the school, has their evaluations that they feel, again, it's an IEP team consensus. So as a parent, it's really important to advocate if you feel strongly one way or the other. We talk to parents all the time about, not going in aggressive, but going in assertive, going to meetings with, your concerns written down. Our family support navigators can go to meetings with families. Again, we don't advocate for the family, but we help the family. We can nudge you under the table, or we can help you prepare afterwards. But it really is important to make sure that the school is on board with, getting the appropriate evaluations. So, advocating for qualified professionals to be doing these evaluations. Parents can seek outside evaluations. And I think that that is happening more often now than it used to happen. But that's tricky for families too, because the school doesn't have to take that into account. If it's an evaluation that has been done on a student by somebody outside of the school doesn't have to take that into account. They can read it, but they don't have to do anything else with it. And then again, if a family is paying for an outside evaluation, and again, the school is not going to take it into consideration, that's pretty frustrating for families. So I think, again, really creating that relationship right out of the gate and having those good conversations with the school, and making sure that that they're on board and that they understand where you're coming from and what your concerns are, and making sure that the evaluations that you feel are necessary, that they're on board with doing, and that they have the qualified people to be performing those evaluations for you. The other tricky part of it is that this might not, when we look at it on paper, like, oh, that doesn't really look like a long period of time, but it can be a long period of time. So when an IEP team determines it's necessary to perform evaluations, the school actually has 45 school days to conduct the evaluation and hold the meeting to discuss the results. And 45 doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot because we're talking about school days. So we're not talking about weekends. We're not talking about school vacations or anything like that. Snow days in Maine, we have a lot of those. So the clock is ticking, and it can take some time. And then again, if we're thinking about a student who, has been struggling with reading, and maybe they've been receiving some support in the classroom, and 6 weeks has gone by, and maybe their level of support has increased, and so we've tried that and now we've put a referral in, and we want some evaluations done, and now we have 45 days. Like, time can tick by, and we do hear families saying, we're 6 months into the school year and we're still trying to get some services for our child. So really important to be as parents, to be on top of again, what these dates are. These numbers are really important, and making sure that you're checking with the school to make sure it's being done. In our states, Child Development Services has 60 calendar days to perform an evaluation. And then this other thing is really important too, this next piece. Parents should receive results of evaluations at least 3 days prior to an IEP team meeting. And it happens a lot. I've had it happen to me actually, where again, there's crunch time and we're trying to do evaluations. And so they send the evaluation to you the day before, or the night before, or something like that. That is not ample time for a parent, especially if these are new evaluations or trying to determine eligibility, or it's a triennial or anything like that. It's a neuropsych eval. Just there's so much to these evaluations. So it's 3 days to me doesn't even seem like enough time. But I do find that we hear from families that they are not receiving the evaluation at least 3 days prior to meeting. And if that is happening, it's within the parent's rights to say, I have not had enough time to review this evaluation. We need to reschedule the meeting. So it's really just an important piece because again, parents need time to be able to look over everything, to process it, to digest it, to write down their questions and be prepared for the meeting. So again, just really important to know that. That's a good piece of information to know. So when is an IEP meeting held? It's held at least annually. That's at a minimum. Again, to revise and update the student's IEP. To review evaluations and determine their present level of performance, to measure progress that a student is making or not making towards their goals, to allow parents and teachers the opportunity to provide updates on a student, and then to consider any changes to services and accommodations. The other thing that not every parent knows is that they can request a meeting at any point to review the plan. So you don't have to just meet annually. If there's something that's concerning, then you can request a meeting. It doesn't mean that if it's a question about something specific like a speech and language goal or something like that, then not everybody in the team may be there. But again, a parent can always request a meeting at any point. So once the evaluations have been done, the team will come back together to review the evaluations and determine eligibility and create the IEP for the student. And again, determining what the goals are. So sort of the what are our goals for the student, and then determining the accommodations, how can they access the curriculum, or how can we help them access their curriculum. So determining goals, we're looking at academics, right? Reading, writing, and math, social and emotional goals, functional, developmental, behavioral for some students, and then therapeutic, OT, PT, and speech. And then again, these are just some examples, certainly not a comprehensive list of accommodations that might be on an IEP for a student. The other meeting that I mentioned briefly when I was talking is the triennial meeting. And so this is also required by law. It's in addition to the annual meeting. Every 3rd year, IDA requires a triennial review. And basically that is to determine if a student is still eligible. So we have to, do all the evaluations again to determine if that student is still eligible to receive those special education services. So this can be a really difficult meeting for families in that, again, it's looking at all of the challenges versus looking at the progress that's being made. And so, but again, thinking of it as this is how the child can continue to receive special education services. That's why the testing has to be done. And that's why we're looking at what the challenges are. So in planning for the IEP team meeting, the school sends an advance written notice 7 days prior to the meeting. It includes a list of who will be present at the meeting, and it states the reason for the meeting. We always tell parents that you should notify the school, the team, if you're planning to invite anybody to a meeting. So if there's somebody outside that's working outside of the school that's working with a student, somebody that has, evaluations or progress notes on your student that you're planning to bring. If you were even bringing Maine Parent Federation to the meeting, we always tell families to let the school know, because you don't, again, it's all about maintaining that relationship, having that trust and communication. And so letting the school know so they don't feel blindsided is just really best practice. However, if a family is planning to bring a legal advocate, or they're planning to record a meeting for any reason, by law, they have to let the school know. And then the school can either bring their own legal representation, or they can, cancel the meeting and have to reschedule. So just always important to let the school know if you're planning on bringing somebody. Familiarizing yourself with the IEP team and each of their roles is really important. So there's the administrator. It's the person who works for the district, who's authorizing the funding for the special education services that a child's receiving. The special education teacher, which is often the case manager for the student, mainstream education student, therapist, OT, PT, speech. There might be guidance counselors or social workers at the table. So again, just being familiar with what each of those roles are. But I think even more importantly too, or just as important, is that for families to know that they are a key member of the team. We do hear a lot of times from families that they feel intimidated. And again, if they're sitting in a meeting with a school system and they're using a lot of jargon or a lot of acronyms that families don't understand, it's difficult sometimes to say, I don't know what you're talking about. But we tell families that it's okay to speak up, to ask why. It's good to ask why if you don't understand something, or why is the school doing something a certain way, or why are they refusing to do something. So it's okay to be assertive. It's okay to ask questions and to feel comfortable to do that, because parents know their children best and they should have a say in shaping their child's education program. So again, some of these things I've kind of talked about a little bit, but advocacy is I think, even it's always been important, but I think today it's even more important than it's ever been. It's essential. So really, again, understanding special education regulations and language. Don't need to know everything. I don't know MUSER from cover to cover either, but again, knowing enough about the regulations, knowing enough of the language is really helpful in a lot of situations. Knowing your rights as a parent and asking questions, as I mentioned, if you don't understand what's going on, there's no shame in asking a question or saying you don't understand or asking why. Planning to discuss your top 3 concerns and know that you can follow up. Because again, as a parent, you can ask for a meeting at any other time. I feel like IEP meetings get shorter and shorter and shorter. And so we're trying to cram all kinds of things into this one meeting. And so oftentimes when we're helping parents prepare, we tell them to, write down their top 3 concerns. Sometimes those other concerns sort of fall in there somewhere. But again, if you don't have enough time to talk about all your concerns, and I tell families to do this, and I think I have it down here a little bit further, but have some actual dates written down as well, where you can reconvene and say, oh, well, we didn't get to, D and C, D and E here, and can we come back together on this date or this date to talk about that? Bringing data is so important. If a family is making a request for something, that they bring the data to make that case. Again, if they're trying to get data from the school, that it's okay to ask the school for data as well. If they're feeling like their child is struggling and you just had some back and forth communication with the school, ask for data on where they're at. Because again, I think that everybody has the best of intentions and nobody wants to see children fail, but sometimes everybody is so busy, and whether it's, you know, oftentimes we hear lack of staff, which that's not a good, not a good excuse, but again, things happen, right? So I think that it's really important to ask for data and to bring data. Data is really important when it comes to any requests for special education for your child. I already mentioned about bringing dates to reconvene, and then we talk a lot about the relationship, acting as an advocate and being assertive, not being aggressive, but being assertive and advocating for your child is essential. So after the meeting, the school sends out the prior written notice. So there's the advance written notice, then the prior written notice. It's interesting, again, the language that is used, but the prior written notice comes after, and it basically states the school's plans to either take or to refuse to take action related to the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of a child. So this is a really important document. We oftentimes tell families that to attach it to the IEP, like this is an important document because this is actually like a summary of what happened in the meeting. So if it's not on this prior written notice, then it really kind of didn't happen, right? So, so important for families to look at this. It's not just a simple little document. It's actually a very important document. So making sure that you're keeping it, stapling it to the IEP, or, keeping it together, however you want to do that. But it's really important because, again, this is sort of a summary of what actually happened in the meeting, whether the school is going to take action or whether they're not going to. So examples: before an initial evaluation, before changing the child's educational placement or their services. And then again, if the school is refusing, a parent is requesting an evaluation be done, and the school is refusing to do that, this is where you're going to see them noting that. So it's really important to make sure you take a look at that. And then parents should receive an updated copy of the IEP within 21 school days. And then changes are implemented in 30 calendar days. I don't know why we changed this 21 school, 30 calendar, but anyways, these are important dates to know. I know in my experience, again, this is just the school district that my son is in, oftentimes the changes start being implemented before I've even received my copy of the IEP. So again, just being mindful and paying attention to those dates is really important. All right, so I'm going to take a drink. This is a big presentation. And so, like I said, a lot of times it's Dylan and I, so I have a chance to take a break. So 504s. So I think, again, we're seeing a lot more 504 plans, especially for kids with dyslexia, diagnoses, specific learning, under that specific, if they have a specific learning disability, then they would receive the IEP. But again, getting a child that is struggling with reading, with dyslexia, writing challenges, we're seeing that it's more challenging to actually get special education services. And so some of these students are falling into this group where they're receiving the 504 plan. So a 504 plan is not special education. It's accommodations. It's allowing changes to the environment or to the situation to remove barriers so the child can access the education. And it's about building support and providing those accommodations so that they can access the general curriculum. So it's not altering of the curriculum, it's just providing the support and accommodations so they can access the general curriculum. And as I mentioned, it is not part of special education. So this is like a side-by-side view, an IEP, which is special education, versus a 504. So IEP, it's IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the law that provides for special education. So the 504, that falls under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It's a civil rights law. The departments are different. So it's OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, for an IEP, because that's special education. Under 504, it's the Office of Civil Rights. Eligibility requirements are different as well. So for an IEP, as I mentioned, developmental delay. And then if over the age of 5, it's one of those 13 qualifying disabilities. And again, the disability must negatively impact a student's ability to access the general curriculum. So again, that's sort of one of those little sticking points that can happen, where if the team does not come to a consensus and the school doesn't feel like the disability is negatively impacting their ability to access the curriculum, then they would not be eligible for special education services. For the 504, they just basically have to have a disability that significantly impacts one or more major life activities. And then under the IEP, what's included is the special education services, that specially designed instruction that I mentioned, accommodations, and then related services. Under the 504, it's accommodations and modifications that are made so the child can access the general curriculum. So again, the 504 plan, so it's section 504 of the rehabilitation. I apologize, it's 8 o'clock at night and I've been going since 8 this morning. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act allows for the provision of these plans based on the civil rights law. So again, it's under the civil rights law. It's not part of special education. It's changing the environment, removing the barriers so the student can access their general education. It does not provide specially designed instruction or adjusting of the curriculum. It provides accommodations. And again, these are just a couple of examples. It's not a comprehensive list. I'm sure all of you, if you have a child with dyslexia, there's a lot more accommodations that can happen, but extra time for tests, assistive technology, helping with organization, graphic organizers and things like that. So there's no standard form or document like there is for an IEP. There's a standard document that's used. There's no standard document for a 504. Each school has the ability to devise their own plans, and they have somebody that acts as the 504 coordinator. Schools are actually not required to invite parents to participate in developing the plan or making small changes to it. But schools do have to notify parents if they are performing evaluations or identifying any new diagnoses. One of the things that is important about the 504 plan is, even though it's not part of IDEA, the IEP or special education ends when a child graduates or they age out at 22 in our state, because that free and appropriate public education has been met. Whereas the 504 plan that's providing those accommodations and modification follows an individual throughout their life. So even for students that may have had an IEP and they're transitioning and they, they want to go to a community college or something like that, they can have a 504 plan as well to provide them with the accommodations and modifications in college. It can also follow them in their living situation and in their job. So accommodations and modifications in those areas as well. So that's one of the things that's really important to know about a 504 plan, is that it doesn't end at age 22 or when a child graduates or ages out. It continues throughout life. All right, so this next section is on procedural safeguards and due process, sort of what happens when there are situations that arise. So the procedural safeguards, the school is required, again, part of law, IDEA, to provide notice of procedural safeguards to parents of students who have disabilities. So it's a document that outlines the parents' rights, basically. It doesn't address really anything else. It doesn't talk about the structure of IEPs and all these other things. It's basically your rights as a parent, and everybody should receive that or be asked if they would like a copy. We know that disputes happen. There are times when parents and school district staff do not agree on certain issues about a child's education. So it might be regarding evaluations. It might be around their eligibility, services, placement, all of that. So if a disagreement occurs and the IEP team process proves difficult or ineffective in developing an acceptable agreement, then there are ways that we can address these disputes. So one of the things that is being used quite a bit now, excuse me, in our state is something called IEP facilitation. It's an optional process though. So again, the school has to agree to it and the family have to agree to it, where a neutral third party is used to promote communication and assist the team in developing an acceptable IEP. So again, it's sort of that first step. Again, it has to be agreed upon, but both parties have to agree to participate in it. But it is a way, it's basically an IEP team meeting with just a neutral third party that's really helping facilitate that conversation and helping families and schools come to an agreement. So there are other ways of solving conflicts. Filing a complaint with Department of Education, mediation is another way, another avenue, and then due process. And we'll dive into each of these. So we have them kind of numbered out 1, 2, 3, but they can be happening kind of all together simultaneously. So basically, if a family feels like there's been a violation, they can file a complaint with the state. So it's alleging basically that the school is in violation of IDEA. A complaint investigator is assigned and they will examine this proposed violation. They're going to determine whether they think a violation has occurred or not. There is no appeal process for the complaint. But if either party is unhappy with the outcome, then they may proceed with mediation or due process. So, and again, this can be kind of happening all together at the same time. So again, a complaint investigator, there's a complaint that's made, the investigator is assigned to examine it, they make a ruling on it, and then again, if the family doesn't agree or the school doesn't agree, then it can proceed on to the next steps. Mediation, often and again, I'm speaking from Maine specifically. A lot of conflicts are dealt with and resolved at this level, and we do Maine Parent Federation, and we do encourage families to to try to find a reasonable solution. Certainly if there's a violation that has occurred, then we want families to go through the appropriate channels and make sure that their child is getting their needs met. However, going to due process, it's an actual court hearing, so it can be very expensive and it takes a lot of time. So certainly we try to encourage families to find a solution that's agreeable. So mediation, again, is another process of resolving a conflict by which both parties, parents and schools, they're agreeing to participate. A mediator is assigned, and both sides are presenting their viewpoints and their sides, right? The mediator is sort of there to help facilitate conversation and try to resolve the opposition, the struggle that we're having. Again, there is no appeal process here. So if their agreement is reached, it's considered a legally binding agreement. If an agreement is not met, then parents can move forward with due process. And due process is an actual court hearing It's the last method by which a dispute may be resolved. So again, there's a written complaint, requesting due process. It's filed with the Maine Department of Education. Again, a hearing officer is assigned. He or she is tasked with, determining what violation has occurred and how that's going to be remedied. Both parties, again, providing evidence and witnesses. And again, there is an appeal process for this if there isn't an acceptable agreement. And again, as I mentioned, in our state, we don't have a lot of due process hearings that I'm aware of. I've looked on our website, the state's website. But again, we try to encourage families to find solutions with schools, because again, a court hearing damages relationships. It's very costly, all of that. So again, we want families to get their students' needs met. However, we want to find, an agreeable way of doing that. So I'm going to wrap up here a little bit. So things to remember, every student is entitled to a free and appropriate public education, least restrictive environment. We didn't talk too much about that, but again, really looking at, always looking at least restrictive environment first. It really takes into account like who, what, where, how. So sometimes that might be the general education classroom with the support, but then for a particular subject or for something else. My son is a perfect example where, at certain times of the day, he is in the general education classroom with his peers, and that's his least restrictive environment for that particular piece of his day. But for other things where he needs to be more focused and with less distractions, and he needs that sort of more direct instruction, then he might be pulled out into the special education classroom or resource room or something like that. So it may look different throughout the student's day. An IEP is written to meet the needs of each individual student. So again, individual. So it's not a one size fits all. And I think that that's, again, schools are getting better. And we also do tell parents too, like, finding creative solutions to getting students' needs met to help them access their education in different ways, whether that's, multi-sensory learning or, again, thinking of different strategies. And again, as parents, you play an important role in that, knowing sort of what works best for your child and knowing that you have the ability and should advocate and speak up for that. If the school and parents cannot agree, then there are ways of resolving disputes, and Maine Parent Federation is here as a resource for you. Some of the other things that I added in here, again, just being familiar, I've already talked about this, but really being familiar with regulations, whether that's federal and state, being familiar with your IEP, your advance and prior written notices, knowing those deadlines, knowing those numbers, knowing what the acronyms mean, knowing the difference between an IEP and a 504, bringing data, supporting data, or strategies or solutions that you know of that you can share with the school when you're requesting services or accommodations for your student. Communication, making sure, I think the other thing too, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but keeping that trail of communication. So if you are communicating with the school, keeping those emails or however I always think it's best to do it in writing, right? But keeping that, keeping all that documentation of conversations as well is really important. And then remember that you know your child best. So I just put a few things in here, and then I have some resources at the end, and then we can do the Q&A. At the end of the day, the most overwhelming key to a child's success is the positive involvement of parents. And then behind every child who believes in himself is a parent who believed in them first. I'm a quote person. So, and then I mentioned our Family Support Navigator program already. Again, some of the things that they can do. And then I did just include some resources as well. You're probably familiar with a lot of these, but some of our local, um, the Children's Dyslexia Center of Portland, I included in here, Seacoast. I also included WWC, the What Works Clearinghouse. I thought it was really interesting because, again, you can put in there different types of interventions and see, how successful they've been with other students and things like that. So I just included some of those resources. And that's it from me. So I will stop sharing my screen. And I think now we are ready for our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that valuable information with us. And Chris is going to kind of facilitate the questions that have come through.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. We've included, just so everyone knows, we've included whenever you talked about resources, we added it to a Google Doc that we will upload to our website within 7 days. So there'll be all those links to either the federal government legislation or the state of Maine legislation, so people can get to both. Because it's a little different depending on what state you're in, but it's overreaching by IDEA, that kind of thing. So that's great. So thank you so much. So one of the big questions came from a parent or a family member who was asking, and if you know this, so if you have vacation days or snow days, rain days, sleet days, all those days that we have that we were hoping to go to school and didn't get to, are the schools supposed to make up those related services on the days that are canceled? For example, if a student is supposed to get 60 minutes of speech per week, but they only got 30 because the other 30 minutes were supposed to be on a day that was canceled due to snow or early release or, something like life, does school have to make that up?
So compensatory services are, so I had a situation where my son was, he was owed compensatory services. That was in a situation where they didn't have staff. So again, when there isn't staffing for a particular service that a child should be receiving and is on their IEP, then a school would be required to provide those compensatory services. However, if there's a snow day or a sleet day, I think as a parent, you can ask for that. Like as parents, we can ask. But I think, again, it's tricky, right? If they have the time or the staff or things like that, there's nothing by law that says that they have to do that. As a parent, you can ask. By law, if there's no staffing, then they would need to provide the compensatory services for, again, for speech or, for something like that. So.
And then what if the educator is absent, which that might go along to staffing, or what about a student's absences?
If a student is absent from school, is it required? Is the school required to make up those services? Not by law.
Okay.
No.
Right. Thank you. Let's see. One of the other questions is, does your organization help provide families or anyone with outside evaluation resources? Like where should they go? Those.
So that's a good question. It is tricky because we do have families that are coming to us that are seeking outside evaluations. And we will help families. We'll look at sort of where a family is at and we'll do some research for them to see what we can find. I am finding that depending on what the family has for insurance, whether they have private insurance or Maine Care or whatever, that sort of dictates who's willing to do an evaluation, but we can help families. We'll help families sort of locate. We won't necessarily make the phone calls for the families, but we will help the family. We'll look at where the family is at, get some more information from them about insurance and things like that. And then we can help sort of locate some of those independent evaluators for a family.
Great. All right. Another question is, many schools are going to, obviously, we're using that multi-tiered systems of support or our response to intervention system. What is an ample amount of time to test out those interventions before requesting that meeting to move the process forward into a special education process?
Mhm. So a lot of times we are seeing, and again, there's multi-tiers, right? So there's, level 1 and level 2 and level 3. We're telling families like 6 weeks. But again, what we're finding is that it might be 6 weeks of like a level 1 support. And so then they try something a little bit more. And what we're telling families is, okay, we're starting with 6 weeks and we're trying 6 weeks. If that's not really working, then okay, maybe we might step it up and do it for another 3 weeks. But again, we don't want to see, it is challenging because school year, right? We have lots of vacations. Sorry, I know we have teachers in the room, but there's lots of vacations and there's things that go on. And so like the school calendar, it does tick away. And so we do hear from families like, okay, my child has been getting this support and we still haven't, we'd like to have some evaluations done and there. So, you know, again, we tell families like after 6 weeks, like check in with the school. What's happening at 6 weeks? Are we seeing any, you know, any progress? And if we're not seeing any progress, like what is our next step? Do you have, a higher level of support? What is that going to look like? Ask the school for some specifics about that. See if that's reasonable to you. If it's not, then again, making your case where you feel like these interventions have been tried and that at this point you would really like the school to conduct some evaluations. So yeah, I think again, as a parent, really, that's why it's so important. We do hear from families that even if you know a little bit of the law and you know a little bit of the language about IDA and FAPE and things like that, that is helpful when you're trying to communicate with schools and getting your child's needs met.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Those are sort of the general questions. I have to admit, I had a personal question because I was like digging deep into this. What is the Chapter 303? How is it related? Because it's like Chapter 303, children with disabilities. How is that related to the MUSER, like the whole Maine Unified? Like, do you have to go deep into that? I just wasn't sure. I did make links to it for people, but I was like,
Chapter 303.
Yeah, Chapter 303 is something called Children with Disabilities. And I didn't know if that overwrote anything or was just part of MUSER. I wasn't sure, but I figured I should ask. I do have a link to it so people can look into it too. I just didn't know if you knew.
It's a sub. I don't know a lot about it. So let me
Okay.
see.
All right. Nope, that's totally fine.
It's that, it's okay. No, it's a sub chapter. I just pulled it up too so that I can see equal opportunity. A provision. So it looks like, again, like a provision that has been made. I don't know when was this. So I don't, if people aren't familiar, we are actually due for like a reauthorization. Like IDEA needs to be looked at, and a reauthorization has not happened in a really, really long time. And so one of the things that we have been working on, actually with Boston University, is educating families on IDEA, on the law, and then helping families understand areas where change could potentially happen and how it could affect their family. And then we've been working with them on creating basically a testimonial on sharing your story with legislators on how to, to make change, right? I've said from the very beginning, like, we started as a grassroots, so we started as just parents sitting around a table. And so I think it's hard as parents to think about, we get frustrated and changes aren't happening, but our voices are important, especially if we all come together and we're all you know, sharing our stories and meeting with legislators, and it is possible for change to happen. So so that is something too that that we feel strongly about, and we've been working on with families. And again, I think we're looking to create some more sort of advocacy and leadership groups, so people can share their stories in hopes of you know, again, there's going to have to be another reauthorization soon. So it'll be important. So
Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate all of your time. That was a long time, we know, but we really appreciate it. And just so everyone knows, this information will be uploaded to our website within 7 days. Just so everyone knows, coming up on June 20th, next week, in Freeport, Maine, Amplify and IDA-NNEA are putting on a symposium. Basically, it's a Maine Science of Reading Summit. Again, Amplify has been wonderful. They're so generous. We've got Natalie Wexler coming, Brittany Bill's coming, and you get breakfast, you get fabulous information, you get lunch, and you get to hang out with all your colleagues and friends, and people really invested in literacy. So definitely look into it. There's still room available, so it's very exciting. So thank you again.
thank you.
Thank you all for being here. And thank you again, Allison. That was really enlightening and interesting to listen to.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And our next Read for Parents will be presented by our own Chris Riley and Andrea Pollock, and that'll be on August 14th, 2024, delving into the parts of the IEP. And again, it'll be starting at 7 o'clock. So I hope you can join us for that. So thank you all for attending and for your presentation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.